Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar of Treat Your Data Like a Product. Quick introduction. My name is Paul Hilson. I'm the managing partner and co-founder of Compoze Labs. I've had the honor to see technology from multiple different lenses throughout my career, starting out as a mechanical engineer, moving on to like an Intel analyst in the military, and then eventually as a developer and program manager in the software consulting world. So that's a little bit about me. Lars, you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. So I'm Andrew Larson. Some people call me Lars. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO. I have less of a diverse background as Paul does. I've been in software, and specifically in engineering, development, architecture my entire career, mainly as a consultant. So I've worked, anywhere with startups to Fortune 50 organizations, doing anything from, DevOps engineering and a lot of focusing on data.
Awesome. All right, so we'll get kicked off here. I spoke with Lars about this. I would be remiss if I didn't start out by making a quick comment about the unfortunate events that are happening in Ukraine. We really, at Composed Labs, condemn the actions of what we see as a tyrant, and our thoughts go out to the families and the people in Ukraine, specifically here at Composed Labs. We're especially monitoring the situation because we have employees and family members in that country. And I guess we are inspired by and we applaud their bravery as they were prepared for this and they're able to mobilize and move their families to safety. And as part of that, kind of, if I can relate that a little bit to this, it's becoming more and more important than ever to make sure that you have a solid IT infrastructure. We saw today in Ukraine a lot of cyber attacks on critical government functions and financial institutions that were really needed in a time of crisis. We saw denial of service attacks and also something I believe that was called, or they're calling wiper, where malware was installed last December and today they activated it and it's just wiping away a lot of data and a lot of information on servers. So, um, you know, I would, from this, I would say make sure you are looking at your infrastructure, understanding the critical components that or how IT plays into your organization and really prioritize making sure it's secure and protected from rogue players or rogue nations. So we're going to move on from that for now, but today's agenda, I'm going to start out by talking about treating your data as a product from more of I'm going to say a strategy standpoint, a business standpoint. And then Lars is going to move in a little bit later and talk about how you implement this from more of a technology side. So starting out with strategy, moving on a little bit into tactics a little bit later. And I'll mention too that if you have a question, add that to chat, and Nathan, our moderator, is going to look at that and he'll ask us the questions at the end. We'll make sure to get those answered. Cool. So about Compose Labs. Now, we are a company that specializes in system integrations. We focus on making a connected experience. And really kind of what our model is that we will not be beat on reliability and security of our integrations. And when I talk about system integrating, I'm talking really about making software ecosystems of something like this, where number one, you see we're creating a connected experience with all different software pieces, or number two, where we're including hardware into a software ecosystem. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how when you set up your when you set up your architecture like this, that's going to play a big role in how you can get your data from it and start to get value from your data. So really kicking into the topic at hand here, why should you treat your data as a product? I'll give the punchline up front. If you do not treat your data as a product, you will lose out on profits, or you will lose out on market share, or what's most likely to happen, you will lose out on both profits and market share. There's just way too many missed opportunities. And if you're not doing this, your competition is doing this. And what I can say about this is there's going to be a door that's opened by looking at your data and analyzing it. The question is that, do you want that door open to you, or do you want that door open to your competition? And so treating your data as a product is what I would consider a strategic advantage. It is something that helps you with growth. It's something that helps you with defense. Uh, while building out a custom application or even doing integrations that we specialize in is something that is going to enhance your capabilities or your operational efficiency at a company, your data is really key in knowing where to prioritize your resources and where to put your time and energy into. So the data is going to tell you more about what to build, and how to build it. And the integrations or custom development is going to be you getting the value from that. So really what I'm trying to say here is that data enables, this might be obvious, data enables data-driven decision making. And that shows there's a lot of different benefits from that. I listed a few here. I could probably write a book about all the different ways you could use data. But these are some specific examples that I have that I'm going to talk through here in a little bit. Now, back to this, how do we get information from what's happening in our system? Well, it's really simple. All we really do is, because we're setting up our architecture in a way, and hopefully you are too, that all the data comes across this central wire, or where that Compoze Labs logo is, kind of call that the integration layer. All we need to do is aggregate all the data and put it really into a database. So if I can actually blow this up a little bit more, when we're talking about here is aggregating your data, putting it in a place that you can consume it, and then slapping on your business analytics like Power BI, Tableau, or Google's Data Studio, right? And doing some at least BI or business intelligence on it. Ideally, you're also putting some machine learning there as well to get some signal in the noise. And from that, you're able to know yourself, your customer, and have a better idea of where you should be going with your firm. So that might sound good, that might make sense, but I'm actually surprised to see how much and how often companies do not do this. And there's a lot of different reasons, but the ones I've kind of come up with are of why companies do not do this is that maybe they're a successful organization as is, and they're, why change what's not broken kind of thing, right? And so maybe you have a little bit of that going on. Maybe there's they don't prioritize their IT. They don't think they're an IT company. So this isn't something that they care about doing as much. But what happens here is that when they do not prioritize, we have seen this for ourselves. We would have lost out on millions of dollars. I know we're a decent sized company. We're not the biggest. There are large firms out there that are losing out on millions of dollars in profits from missed opportunities. And even more so, what's even a little bit more dramatic is there are firms that are blindsided by new entrants who did prioritize their data and know how to super serve customers and have a better product because of their analysis and ability to take their data and learn from it. So in the recent years, we've seen a lot of incumbents be unseated, and I would argue that that shouldn't happen. That should never happen because the incumbents have the money. They all they had to do was prioritize their IT to continue their growth, and they failed to do so. So really, the bottom line is that organizations do miss out a lot on profits by not taking the data as a product approach. And us at Compoze Labs, we're not a simulation company, but just for everyone attending this webinar, we made a very advanced simulation. So we made a simulation to show you what happens if you do not prioritize your data as a product. So here's your data. Here's you using that. That's a database, by the way, that this person is writing. And that's you, your data, it is a product. You get value from it. You can use it to mobilize, to move, to take action on. But if you don't leverage it right, it looks something like this. And I want to give a quick example of this happening. There's a company called Parking Panda, and as a spoiler alert, they were called Parking Panda. This was a mobile app where you could, before you started to drive, and if I knew I was going to Minneapolis or Chicago, and I wanted a parking spot, I could book that in advance on my mobile app. I don't have all the insights in this specific company, but what I imagine happened was that they were not looking at their data in the way that they should. They prioritize kind of the casual user of, oh, I'm going to be, I just happen to be traveling to Minneapolis today. What app should I use? They saw that the kind of the casual, the person who goes to the cities every once in a while as the person with the lowest cost of acquisition, so they targeted them. They did fine. They made some profits, but another company took a different approach. And I would argue they did use their data as a product. And I know about this because I'm getting my MBA at Northwestern, and this was an MBA, this was a Kellogg and Northwestern alum that did this data analysis, and they looked at their data and they said, you know what? I'm able to see from this that our most profitable customer are the business customers, not these casual customers. So we need to focus on them. From doing that, from being able to make a data-driven decision and make a strategic move to focus on a new customer type, they're able to get more profits than Parking Panda. You might recognize the company. They're even a Spot Hero, and they bought Parking Panda, and they're now the leader in this industry of being able to book parking spots in advance. So really, if I had to summarize this real quick, Lars and I met each other while running, so I love running analogies. Parking Panda might have thought their data looked something like this. Things seemed to be going fine, but in reality, it was more something like this. It's messy. You can't really tell where the horde is moving, and you maybe even question the mental stability of your data and why it would do such a thing like this. Looking at the time, I do have time for a few more examples. I want to do another kind of a quick case study. This is a current customer that we have in a really high level of what their retail architecture is going to look like. And if I can walk you through this real quick, what is happening is that to enter this type of store, they need to verify that you are 21 years of age or older. And then at the store, there's going to be kiosks where you can purchase products. There's a point of sale system that Square is representing. There's a smart locker where you can pick up your product. And there's also an e-commerce solution that I'm showing as Magento here. Now, our focus is on making a connected experience and making sure that data flows through the system so that you can get the most value from your data. And one specific use of this data that is given these guys or going to give this company a strategic advantage is what's happening at the frontier. So what we are doing in this scenario is we're going to do the first part is cool. It's a customer enters the store and they need to, instead of having a person check their ID, we're going to have a machine do that. So we're going to get their ID scanned, and we're going to do a facial recognition to make sure the person that I'm looking at, that the machine is looking at, matches the person on that ID. Once that happens, green lights go off, they can enter the store. But because we're all about making a connected experience, and again, I'm going to use the buzzword, treating your data like a product, we send that data into our integration layer, and we pull in that customer information from the point of sale system and the e-commerce site. And we are able to tell the employees at the store, hey, this is Paul. It's his first time ever visiting here. Maybe you want to show him around the store. Or, hey, this is Lars. He's a little bit obsessed with your store. his 30th time in 2 months coming here, and he really likes this specific type of product. But we've noticed that when people buy this product, we can upsell them this other product. That's the type of data that we're talking about that you need to leverage. That's going to give them, this company, a leg up versus their competition. Real quickly, this is another example of a friend of mine, a colleague at my school, who did a quick 5-week project. And the point of this is to show even a little bit of effort goes a long ways. At the American Red Cross, one of their initiatives is to do blood drives, make sure they have enough supply of blood to support their cause, right? If you have too much, they pay too much, and they're going to pay a lot in storage, blood expires, and you probably wasted a lot of money in marketing when you didn't have to do that. So to make sure you have the right supply of blood, they tried to project how much people are going to donate. And when my colleague went in, they had at best a 50% chance to guess when someone was going to come in next and donate. American Red Cross had really good data. They're able to give information to my colleague, and he simply put it through a machine learning algorithm. The one he decided to use was called Random Forest, and he was able to predict with about 75% accuracy if a person would come in the next 3 months to donate blood, which was a huge improvement and led to much more accurate predictions. And this wasn't a large multi-year initiative. This was something he did in like 5 weeks of time. So it's becoming a lot more, machine learning is becoming a lot more usable, and it's almost inexcusable for firms to not be using it. My last example I want to go through is a major firm called, you might have heard of them, called Marriott. And if you're interested to learn a little bit more about this, he did an interview in 2020 with CNBC, and he talked about how he had all these strategic initiatives. And you can see in this interview that he said the way that we're going to do this is by investing in IT. This is a company that prioritized IT and knew that if they had the right data, they could leverage that and make better strategic decisions. One such example of that would be how they target their customers and making sure that their customers fit into the proper products. And one of them would be the W hotels. W hotels are known as the party hotels. They look for people who want to go out and stay up late, jam music. Versus like maybe like a Westin, where you maybe would go there more for business or a quiet family stay. And just to paint the picture here, here's what a W hotel looks like. And what they're able to do with their IT infrastructure and their data collection is it's very simple, but it makes a lot of sense. If they see that you have stayed at a W hotel before and you book a W hotel, that looks great. That looks normal. But if they see that you've stayed in another one of their hotels and potentially did something like you asked for a crib to be added to your room, you can expect a call from Marriott, specifically the W hotel, and they'll say, hey, just to let you know, it's noisy here. It's kind of a party scene. Is that what you are expecting? Because they want to make sure that their customers have a great experience with the products and services that they offer. And an example of this would be, I pulled up some reviews from TripAdvisor for the W Hotel in Chicago. And here's one person giving it 5 stars, absolutely loving it, thinking this is great. I'm going to guess, went out to the bars and had a good time. Here's the same hotel at the same time period, and this person's giving it a 1 star, and he's complaining about how his neighbors were blasting music till like 3 a.m. and the hotel would not tell them to be quiet, essentially, right? And that's because the hotel doesn't want them to be quiet. The noisy neighbors are their target customers. This person, they missed a little bit, and it looks, well, I'm gonna say this. This is exactly what Marriott wants to happen, to discourage this type of person to come to this hotel and encourage the noisier neighbors to stay. And I'm going to finish up my section of this webinar by just saying I'm not just making this up. This is a study that came out last year from McKinsey and Company, and it's titled Catch Them If You Can, How Leaders in Data and Analytics Have Pulled Ahead. And what we're seeing from the study is that high performing organizations are more likely to be treating their data as a product as compared to other organizations. And high performing organizations here are considered organizations that have experienced 10% of growth year after year for at least the last 3 years. It's not a guarantee that you treat your data as a product. If you treat your data as a product, that you will be a high performing org, but you're more likely to be in that boat. And I'm going to argue as we move ahead in the future that you're going to see this blue line become, I'm going to say, longer or bigger and bigger because I'm seeing that organizations of the future are data organizations, and they're just going to have they're going to have a strategic advantage over people who have traditional infrastructure, which Lars is going to talk a little bit about the difference maybe between the traditional infrastructure and treating your data as a product. So that is my section of it. Lars, you ready to take over?
Let's do it. All right, are we all ready with can you see the same graphic?
Looks good.
Cool, we're gonna see that one more time. Yeah, so what I'm gonna start with here is Paul did a great job of introducing, the need to be treating our data as a product, the need for, for data within our IT organizations. What I'm going to talk about is a lot of IT organizations, we talk about the traditional infrastructure, they're attempting to do it right, but a lot of times, they fall flat, right? And we see this a lot within our, as a consultant or out in the wild in IT, right? Is that they have a lot of the data, but they're not able to do anything with it. They're not able to ask the right questions and get the right answers. So just to start with a level set, when we talk about data, of course, there are many types of data within an organization, but for this specifically, we care about 2 types. One is transactional or maybe operational data. So you can think about that in terms of like, an order was placed or a customer was created or inventory is restocked, right? It's that transactional data that's like, fueling our business, right? And then there's the analytics side of the house. And that's still transactional data, but that's generally, usually represented over time. And it's what we use to help answer those important questions. Things that we can use to create personalized customer experiences like with the W Hotel, or reduce operational costs and ultimately allow us to make those data-driven decisions. So those are the types of data, right? Now let's talk about how we've traditionally tackled that kind of in the enterprise data space, right? So, originally maybe 10, 15 years ago, I think data warehouse was a big popular technology stack. That's kind of transitioned into a data lake. But what those two have in common is that they're a centralized place throughout the entire organization for us to be able to, ask those questions too, right? Like that was the source of truth that we were going to use. So if we talk about this data lake architecture I have here, it's a simplified version, but it gets the point across, right? Is on the top left and the top right, we have our operational or transactional teams, right? So that's maybe our supply chain team that's managing our product and inventory data. On the top right, we have our e-commerce team, right? And that cares about products and our orders that are being placed. And then down at the bottom, we have the separate team, this kind of data lake or data warehouse or data infrastructure team. And these are actual separate teams, right? And so the idea was that, as you can see those lines going down on the left side, it's that as our transactional systems are producing data, those are getting funneled in to our data warehouse or data lake in this case. And then that can be leveraged then by other domains. So for example, that product data, the e-commerce site needs to know what products are available and what inventory is available, as well as our business or data analytics side of the house. So now the problem with this, and it may not seem intuitive at the time, but this is what we've been experiencing over the past, 5, 10, 15 years, is that when you have these separate teams, they have competing priorities with your operational team. And when you think of a data warehouse, it's not generally just one team. So what I have here, in the diagram in the middle is that a lot of organizations, especially as you scale, you end up with, 3 different teams. So you have one that's responsible for ingesting all that data that's produced. You have another that's responsible for processing and transforming that data. And then you might have a third team that's responsible for serving that up, whether that's to a machine learning team, a data analytics team, or even just other operational teams. And so the problem that came from this, though, is the fact that these teams, there's 2 issues, right? One is that these teams don't really know the data. They don't really understand supply chain data or e-commerce data like the teams that are building and running those operational systems. And so the problem comes in that, 1, it becomes difficult for them to understand what's going on. And then 2, it's that as they're trying to produce and receive that data, it's that they were struggling with conflicting priorities, right? It's that the e-commerce team, their priorities were to serve their e-commerce customers, not necessarily to serve the analytics teams. And so ultimately what happened, right, is that rather than this promise of a data lake, what we ended up with was the thing on the right is a data swamp. And so what is a data swamp, right? What are some of those characteristics? Well, ultimately, because of that lack of accountability from our operational teams, because of a lack of governance of that data coming in, our data became disorganized and scattered, right? It's often incomplete. In some cases, it fails to get to the swamp entirely. And so what we end up with is that while we have this central place where we're trying to store the data, the business is still unable to answer the questions that they need to have answered in order to improve their operations or connect with their customers, right? So what we propose and what the industry is starting to move towards is that it's not a limitation in technology, right? It's not that the data warehousing or the data lake or the ETL jobs or the pipelines are a limiting factor. It's that we're not taking a product mindset with that data, right? And so let's start with what do we mean by a product mindset, right? What do we mean when we're talking about building software, right? So to simplify it, because of course we could do a whole nother talk on what a product mindset is, right? But to simplify it, it's that a product mindset is building software that our customers actually want to use. So not software that's using the latest and greatest technology, right? But what we need to do is we want to know what our customers actually want. And how do we do that? Well, we ask them, we talk to them, right? So by taking a product mindset to our data, the first question that we as technologists should be asking is what questions does our business care about? So things like, how can we help our marketing team reach our customers? How can we help our warehouse or operational teams optimize their processes, right? And so to take that, a step further, is what really we mean by that when we say, let's take a product mindset to data, we mean be intentional with the questions that we are asking, right? Much of the problem with the traditional data lake pattern was it suffered from, if we build it, they will come, right? So what I mean by that is that these systems are often designed without their customers in mind, their customers being the business and then other operational teams as well, right? But ultimately it's the business. And so, for example, rather than saying, let's build a customer analytics system, we want to build areas of our software system based on real use cases. So things like customer buying habits, customer product recommendations, right? And so ideally, we should be knowing the questions that the business is asking before we're even building anything. So things like, when do we need to replace our inventory? What are the bottlenecks in our operations? Things like that. We want to be intentional with what we're building and construct our systems to be targeted to answer those questions, not just this generic, well, if we dump all of our customer and orders data in one spot, we'll be able to answer, we'll be able to figure out what the questions are later. Okay, so then the next logical question, right, is how does that change our architecture? So what are we doing right now that doesn't fit that? So this is the architecture we talked about before, right, with the separate teams, the operational side, and then the analytics side at the bottom. And so what we've found is that if you move those analytic infrastructure, systems, and teams within the operational team, you have a far greater success rate in not only getting the right answers, but asking the right questions. So it's not that we're saying don't use a data lake. It's not that we're saying don't use a data warehouse. It's more of a restructuring of where that data lives and who's ultimately responsible for it. So if you look at the top left, right, we have our supply chain team, but we've added a few things, right? We've added a data engineer. We've added, in this case, just for use of an example, Power BI on top of a database, right? And then on the right side, we have our e-commerce team, which has a data engineer as well, but then it also has a data warehouse, right? Because maybe that technology was right for the questions that they were trying to answer. And then ultimately, we still have this need to share data across our organization, but we just don't want it to be so centralized. And so how do we go about doing that? This is kind of like the last piece of the puzzle, right? If we're saying that the analytics is starting to live more within our operational teams, it's, well, how do we message data back and forth, right? How does the supply chain team get the product and inventory data to the e-commerce team so that they can do what they need with it, right? And that's where, we at Compoze are big fans of the concept of a publish subscriber framework or integration pattern. And basically what we mean by that is, as data is happening, right? So as an order is placed, right? And we need to deduct inventory on the supply chain side. So when an order is placed, that's what we call a producer or a publisher. And then what we have are these pipes where we're sending these first class kind of domain level messages that anyone can be a receiver on or a subscriber to, right? And so the reason we like this is you publish once, multiple receivers can receive it. If you have a new area of if you have a new question, right, that needs to be asked, if you have a new series of questions that your business needs to answer, you can construct these full stack teams and easily, tap into those feeds of data, right? It's asynchronous and it's scalable, as it'll scale with you as your system scales. And then really the thing I want to drive home, which I kind of alluded to, but it's really about, those messages need to be very much focused on the business. And so what do I mean by that? So rather than publishing a message that's like an order has changed and then having folks need to interrogate it on their end, it's really like, what are the key things about an order? An order was created, an order was updated, an item was removed from an order, or an order was canceled, right? So as we're talking about these first class business driven events, it makes it far easier for us to start to consume those. And then for those centralized analytics teams to actually, ask the right questions and get the right answer. And so just bringing it all together is, once you kind of, push that analytics, that data engineering more into your operational teams, what you end up with is a system that not only supports your business, but also gives you the insight and the flexibility to move quickly so that you can capitalize on the data that you already have. And, that'll take us from, going like this and slamming into the ground, as Paul's beautiful simulation was proving, into, riding that database off into the sunset. And that's all we got. So now I think it's time for questions. Paul, do you want to take over here?
For sure. Yeah. Thanks for that, Lars. So I'm seeing 2 questions so far, and I'm going to actually pose them to you, Lars. And they actually go together. So what would be the first, I'm going to combine these into one. So what would be a good first step for a company that wants to start taking a data-driven approach? And as part of that too, if I already have an existing infrastructure that's not doing this, does this mean I need to blow it out and start from scratch, or what can I do instead of that?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the first part of that question was what's the first step to take, right? Yes. And of course, the first step is to, start putting your product hat on, right? And it's asking the business, what are the questions that they have that they can't get an answer to, right? What are the, if it's an operational side of it, what are the bottlenecks that they're having? What are the pain points that they're having that they need to address? If it's on the marketing side, it's, what's the insight you're looking for when you're trying to produce these marketing campaigns to be more targeted or directed? And then as far as the second half of that question is, if you're kind of in that more traditional side of it, do you need to blow everything away? And the answer is, of course not, right? And I've been on many, many projects in the past that have had that big bang approach, right? Where it's, we want to re-architect and re-platform, go from this all the way to this all at once. And that is rarely very successful, right? And it's also not taking that product approach, right? Where you want to understand what's to simplify it, what's the most important question to your business to have answered? Start there, right? So what are the systems and the teams that might involve, and start to slowly, re-architect, but also more importantly, reorganize your teams and your structures to answer that question. And then you can continue on where you're getting that incremental progress and gains without having that huge risk of taking a big bite all at once.
Right. So what questions am I trying to get answered? What data do I have? And what format can I consume it so that I can have the proper response to that question? Mm-hmm. I'm going to add to, I think you kind of mentioned, instead of having doing one big shot, blowing something away and starting something brand new, you can peel it off layer by layer and improve on it. And all for that, I've seen systems before, and what I've said before with legacy systems that you can't do this with is that legacy scares me with what it cannot do, what insights it does not allow you to see what's going on at your firm. Yes, agree that you need to, you can blow everything away and start from scratch. But even if you get a little bit of value at a time by taking this out layer by layer, to move this to kind of a next more a modern infrastructure, that's going to add value quickly and right away that you can profit from. So next question is, in terms of staffing, what expertise is needed in a full-time hire or a consulting group?
Yeah, sure. So I'm happy to take that one as well. And I think the question might somewhat depend on whether you're kind of a new organization or you're more of a startup, or you don't have a lot of that legacy technical debt, versus if you're an entrenched enterprise company that has a lot of technical stuff already there. So I'll start with on the startup side. So the advantage to a lot of the cloud providers these days, like Google and Amazon and Azure, is they have a lot of the big data capabilities, but also the I'll call it the data platforming and plumbing capabilities that you can start to leverage. So for example, like we at Compoze, right? So we have some internal tooling that we take advantage of that, where it's the infrastructure is more or less taken care of, right? Where we can spin that up and configure it so that we can start piping that data. So then really what your team needs to focus on is the traditional full stack of building your product, and then some data engineering or expertise, right? So people that are familiar with, a Power BI or an SMI Force or what have you, that understanding is so critical to the team. And it's not that an individual has to have all of those expertise. It's more that we want to build a full stack team that has some people that specialize, and of course can do other things, right? But it's more about building that full stack team that has those capabilities. And then on the enterprise side, generally speaking, you're going to have those technologists that have those specializations. So then the problem becomes more about that organizational shift, right? It's about cross-training people to be comfortable that are on the analytics side, working more on the operational side, and vice versa.
Sure. So you're saying that often it's not necessarily a problem of skill set, it's how you're organizing people within an organization to align with this.
And just to give an example, a similar thing that's been happening in the industry over the past 5 to 10 years. I keep using this term full stack, right? Well, originally what that was is that oftentimes we would organize our companies around technology skill sets. So you'd have a UI group, and then you'd have a backend group. But that led to a lot of tugging and pulling, right? Of if we're thinking about this agile mindset of we want to be able to deliver things incrementally, that had a lot of artificial handoffs associated with it, right? So then what we started to do is shift our teams to be full stack, where we'd have some people that specialize in user interface work, some people that specialize in backend work, and no one has to be an expert in everything, right? But then what you would do is you're able to deliver full functioning features within one isolated group, right? You didn't have all of these external dependencies. And so what the industry has been moving towards and what we're proposing here is you just take that one more step further with that data insight and analytics side.
Very nice. Another question, I think it's more for you as well. Is this a first step? If you're doing a digital transformation, right? You've gotten the CEO is saying, I'm going to go through a digital transformation. Is doing what we talked about here the very first step of the process, or is it further down the line? When do you start to think about this?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's going to depend on where your maturity level is at the moment. So for example, if you are, a lot of enterprise, customers and companies these days are still very much divided by skill sets. So you still have your UI, your backend, your database team, what have you. I think that I think you want to first focus on just that general product mindset shift within your organization. Because if you don't really have that product mindset just from your operational teams, I think it's going to be difficult to kind of shift this with your analytics side as well. So this might be like a phase 2 type of shift, but I don't know that there's anything stopping you from, as long as you are doing a very thin slice, where I'm saying you focus on one part of vertically stacking your product and one part of asking these analytical questions, I think you can do them in tandem, but it's really going to come down to not trying to do too much at once. So it's really about, trying to stay very vertical and not trying to do a big horizontal shift of your whole organization.
Very nice. I'll take this next question. Someone asked, are there privacy concerns to collecting/using customer data? Such as, is there a risk that people will start to feel watched or mistrust the company in the background, even as certain metrics are being optimized? And there's going to be some of that, but you have to measure kind of your risk reward there, right? If you do none of that, another company is going to take the risk, and I think get that reward there. And I would be very surprised to see a company that is going to be doing more than a Google or an Apple. It's not likely I'm able to collect more than that. So if you're, and as us as a customer base as a whole, there's going to be individual pockets that are not okay with this. But the masses seem so far to be totally accepting of this. Can this go too far? Absolutely. Lars and I were talking about a company earlier this week that their goal is to be able to have every single human face in a database of theirs in the next 5 years or so that they could tell by just your face who you are, where you live, and ideally even like they saw a license plate, bam, they pull up and say that is you. That is probably going too far. That is probably going to get some pushback, but I would say you need to look at, with anything, there's going to be a risk reward, and I don't think we're at a point right now that that risk is going to be more than, or the cost to you would be more than the profit that would bring in. Excellent. Okay, well, I think we are just out of time, so I'll wrap up by saying thank you everyone for coming to Compoze Labs, our first webinar, and really happy that you guys joined us for this. And we will have more in the future. There will be future episodes to be continued, so stay tuned for that.